Storytelling is a great and remarkable gift, which Peter was actually gifted with. He could tell a tale better than any. Brendan Nolan is going to do one now.
When he worked in a job and the job ended and he had no money because of the recession, so he decided he'd become an actor and make lots of money. For he reckoned that all he had to do as an actor was to find his spot in the light and say the words, and he would be right. But while he was waiting for Jim Sheridan to ring him to appear in his latest film, he had no money. So he took to reciting poetry for passers-by for money. The only problem with this great idea was that Willie would not recognise a poem if he fell over a line of it. So he bought a book in a bargain shop, Great Poets. And there was no use in reciting other people's poetry because he didn't think he'd ever get to be famous doing that. So he decided he'd adapt them, and he called them a tribute. So then he went to Phoenix Park, where he thought people might be good for a touch of a few bob for a few lines of poetry, because they'd be more relaxed than the hurrying people of O'Connell Street or elsewhere in the city. And the first poem he recited, instead of the song of Wandering Angus, it was the song of the Wandering Buck Deer. And then he gave them a lash of, instead of I am of Ireland, it became I am of Ballybock by Willie. And when he got to the fairy song that was sung above the bridal bed of Diarmid O'Grania, where they lay in the crumlock with the people of Fairy, he came out with, those were the days, my friend. And he was doing grand, and he was in the middle of the park, and Japanese tourists were stopping and having their pictures taken standing beside him, because they thought, as they very well might, listening to the lines of poetry that he was reciting, that he actually was Willie Yeats. Because it's easy to get confused when you're in a different country. But he said, no, I'm not William Yeats. I'm Willie with just one name. Like Elvis, or Madonna, or even Bertie. And then it got worse, they decided he was called Willie One Name. So they were calling him that, and he was getting on fine, and they were throwing a few bob his way, and the Lone Ranger turned up. Because they were calling him Willie One Name, and it sounded like an Apache. But the ranger said, you'll have to leave the park for reciting poetry without a licence. And he escorted him down as far as Parkgate Street, across the road, if any of you know it, from Cunningham Road bus garage. And he had no audience, and he had nothing. And he was trying his hand, but they were all flying past in cars and buses and everything else, and nothing much was happening. Until the Lone Ranger arrived down again and opened out the jeep, and out stepped Thelma. And Thelma was a fiddle player who'd been busking up at the dog pond, and she too was a victim. So Thelma and Willie joined together, and Willie recited the poems as best he could, because he was not a good actor. And he did this way. And Thelma played behind him nicely as it went on. And they were doing all well and good. And they were on the Lake Isle of the Furry Glen, and a few more besides. And as you well know, if you study the park at all, as I have over time, lots of people come and go, and beasts come and go, and dogs are in and out. And there was this dog, and it was a Jack Russell Terrier, and it went by the name of Ratzinger. And Ratzinger liked the poem, and he liked the tune, and he wagged each day, he stopped each day, and he wagged for pass for a tale as he listened to the tunes and the poems and whatever was going. And what happened next, Willie blamed on the woman with the Dr. Spock ears. For she came walking out of the park, and she had a pair of earphones on her like this. And they were for all the Dr. Spock out of Star Trek, and that's what he was thinking as she was going by. But he was on a poem about the last bus conductor on Route 66. 2 minutes. And he was getting into the point of things because Thelma was lashing into something behind him because she couldn't quite hear because he was standing forward of her and she was lashing into something and he was saying something and his hand went up like that. And the Spockelight took exception to it because he thought she was being rude, or Willie was being rude. So she turned around and she had a branch from a chestnut tree. She'd been thrown up to get a few chestnuts and she gave Willie a tap on the knee. And she ended the ballad of the last conductor en route there and then. For Willie sat down, winded. Helen at that stage didn't know what was happening, she just saw he had been assaulted. So she took the violin and she hit the Spockelight. Unfortunately, the violin connected with the earphones and it broke. A row of eruptions then started between the two of them. And a man had been standing there who was from America and his name was Lewis. And he was a practicing harmonicist. And when he saw the row starting between the two people, he stepped in to help Thelma, as you would. But Ratzinger, mistaking the occasion for a right row, sunk his fangs into the arse of the Yank, who howled because Ratzinger had a hold of him. But Ratzinger was a Republican dog as well, and he held on. Well, a passing minibus full of Japanese tourists saw what was going on and decided it was Dublin Street Theatre. And they hopped out. And one of them, as luck would have it, had had her picture taken the other day, and she shouted, "It's Willie one name, Willie one name." So they all started clapping, thinking it's Yates back again from the dead. And they were clapping and clapping and clapping. And such was the row and eruptions that for the moment they forgot about the poor American with the dog hanging over his behind. And he was yelping and yelping and yelping. And the Lone Ranger turned up then to see what was going on. And he thought there was a bit of a row. He thought all the Japanese were involved in it as well. So he rang the guards. And there was a helicopter after dropping into the depot above in the park. And they came over. And the Japanese went mad altogether. Because here was a helicopter flying overhead and they thought the whole thing was being filmed, so they started waving at the helicopter and taking pictures. At that stage it calmed down a little bit and Thelma let fly and kicked Ratzinger in the nuts. Whereupon Ratzinger let go and fell off. At that stage there was an open top bus just going past. You see the things going up and down. And Thelma and Lewis jumped on the bus and headed west for a new life together. The park ranger arrested the Spockelight for stealing chestnuts from the park. The Japanese took pictures of themselves, taking pictures of themselves. And when he went around the corner, I got on the bus. And he went home. And he took out a sheet of paper and he wrote to Avon. And he asked them, had they any positions for an Avon lady in his area. Because he reckoned that selling cosmetics or whatever they sell in drag was easier than being a performing poet in Phoenix Park.